Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sumer Sports Show. Not this week featuring Eric Eager and Thomas Dimitrov, your normal hosts, but instead myself, Parker Fleming, and my colleague Tej Seth are stepping in to fill in for the guys as they're off doing media stuff and Radio Row and all the fun Super Bowl stuff. We're at home talking about the Super Bowl, and that's what we'll do. This is part two of our two-part Super Bowl preview on Monday. We broke down kind of the how did we get here, the big stories, the macro picture of the acquisitions, the transactions, the decisions that both teams made, Kansas City and Philadelphia, in getting to the Super Bowl this year. And today, we're excited to dive into the numbers, kind of the nitty gritty, talk about some more of these specific matchups, the specific props, the specific numbers that are important to watch during this game. So I, of course, am Parker Fleming at Stats and More on Twitter. I'm joined by Tej Seth at Tej FB Analytics on Twitter. How's it going, man?
Good. Yeah, I'm glad we can do this again. A lot of nice people said some really good things about the first show that we did on Monday. I see Zach Rogers in the chat here. He was one of them. So really appreciate all the kind of words, and I'm excited to really dig into the game today and preview it.
Yeah, I feel like, Tej, I'm going to take a moment there and just say that was our second time being on a podcast together. I believe I was on your podcast, Take the Points, last season at one point. So for our second podcast attempt ever, I feel like we did a pretty good job on Monday. Hopefully we're going to build on that as well. Of course, today we're gonna talk about the Super Bowl. Before we get into things, make sure you're subscribed to the Sumer Sports Twitter account. We're really trying to get that to 5K as a matter of just personal validation. Tej has been posting some great content every day. Almost feels like I think he just told me he was rate limited on Twitter because he was posting so many graphs today on Super Bowl. And make sure you're following that. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel as well, so you don't miss episode shorts. A lot of stuff in the works for this offseason there as well. Enough with the business. Let's talk about the Super Bowl. The Chiefs and the Eagles are meeting. Two teams that, as we talked about on Monday, kind of different paths, but are still here. We've got number one EPA per play on overall in Kansas City. We've got number two EPA per play margin in Philadelphia. So legitimately two of the best teams in the NFL this year. How excited are you for this matchup, Tej?
I'm so excited. I think that these were the two best teams this season, and we saw that with them getting the 1 seed and then proceeding to do really well the entire playoffs and kind of get to the Super Bowl here. And I think it reflects in the spread line when it's only Eagles -1.5, how tight these two teams are. And we're going to kind of see a really cool thing play out here. We're going to see the best roster in the league versus the best quarterback. And we can kind of see like how it's going to kind of go, where like how much can Mahomes do to overcome his roster not being as good as the Eagles roster, and then how much does Jalen Hurts have to do to kind of keep his roster afloat throughout this game. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And the styles I think are so interesting. So if I can start us off and just go with the big picture, I haven't tweeted this out. So if you're watching this live, you're getting an exclusive look at the stats, advanced stats preview for this game here. And so first overall EPA per play margin for Kansas City. They're first on offense, 18th on defense. So leaning a little bit offense heavy. The Eagles are a little more balanced, second overall, but they're third in offensive EPA per play. They're first in defensive EPA per play. We talked about the improvements that the Eagles made specifically on defense last season. Breaking this down just very, very briefly, I like to look at the EPA per pass and the EPA per rush. I think that's really important as we look at selection, because Tej, as you know, it's not enough to say, hey, you're really good at running the ball, you're really good at passing the ball. It matters when you run the ball, when you pass the ball, and how the selection matters there. So the Kansas City Chiefs are first in rush rate over expected. That's a kind of the backwards way to say it. They are passing the most in any given situation of any team in the NFL. The Eagles, a little bit more balanced. They're rushing a little bit more. Obviously, we talked about Jalen Hurts and his legs on Monday and how they move. So you kind of have a caricature of a passing forward team, and then a little bit more gritty run team there with the Eagles. And the Chiefs are first in EPA per pass. They're fourth in EPA per rush. But we know that they're passing so much that rushing success might be a little bit inflated just because they're able to rush in only advantageous situations because their passing game is so good. On the flip side, if we look at Philadelphia's defense, they're 21st in EPA per pass, but they're first in EPA per rush. That leads me to believe that, again, because of their positive game state and because of their ability against the rush, teams are not really rushing against Philadelphia to challenge them. They're passing a bunch to try and catch up, to try and take advantage of that secondary. And so that's where you see that big split between their, first and 21st in rushing and passing EPA per play. So what teams are doing matters. On the flip side, the Eagles are really balanced, first in EPA per rush, sixth in EPA per pass. And the Chiefs have a similar split where they're slightly worse against the pass, better against the rush for similar reasons. Teams are having to keep up. They're having to pass more against the Chiefs to try and outpace Patrick Mahomes. So a clash of styles here that I think the numbers bear out really, really nicely.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And the thing that gets me most excited about this table here, and it's a wonderful table. I love when you put these out every week, but it's the Chiefs having the number one pass offense this season versus the Eagles number one pass defense. I think that's a huge matchup, kind of like when there's an unstoppable force and immovable object type situation. So I dug into some of the numbers here on what we usually see when we see a very, very high end pass offense go up against the pass defense. So this is the second time in Super Bowl history where it's been number one pass offense versus number one pass defense. The 2013 Super Bowl was the other time with Peyton Manning's Broncos kind of coming in against the Legion of Boom Seahawks. And that game kind of got out of hand for the Broncos. But what was interesting was the Eagles had the number one pass defense this year, having a negative 0.09 EPA per pass against the Seahawks. When they entered that game, they had a negative 1.7 EPA per pass. So basically double what the Eagles pass defense was. So they were more dominant than the Eagles. And we kind of saw that with the 2013 Broncos as well. They had a 0.34 EPA per pass, while the Chiefs are at 0.27, which was good enough to be first, but not good enough to be at the Broncos level. And that was at a time when defenses had more control over the game. When we've seen some other instances lately of number one pass offenses versus number one pass defenses, we saw the 2019 Ravens scored 37 points on the Patriots in the regular season game in 2019. We saw the 2020 Green Bay Packers score 32 points on the number one Rams defense, one of the best defenses of the past couple of years. So offense kind of has won the battle lately. And I think when you have someone like Mahomes and what the Chiefs have to offer on pass offense, you should be pretty bullish about what they can kind of do on that side of the ball. But it's going to be a very tough matchup going up against this Eagles pass defense, especially their pass rush.
Yes, and I want to get into that. I want to talk about that. I have to point out this graph you made that just kind of plots the offensive and defensive ranks of Super Bowl teams, and a lot of them are very good. They're in the top 10, top 15, and hilariously, the 2015 Broncos ranked 25th in offense the year they went to the Super Bowl, which is very funny to me. Yes, I want to push in on that point about the Seahawks and the Broncos and their offense defense matchup and how the distribution has kind of condensed. You mentioned that idea that what we have is defenses have less control. Again, I'm going to put you on the spot just like I did on Monday. When you say that, what do you mean? What do you think is different about the way teams are attacking and reacting, offense and defense, in 2013 compared to 2022? Why is that distribution compressed? And why does that look like those two teams that are first in offense and defense aren't, quote unquote, as good as they were in 2013?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is a great question. I love that we're talking about this. I think it comes down to how good play callers and coaches have got at scheming on both sides of the ball. And that's what's really compressed this, right? So we just talked about the 2020 Rams, and we see this Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio, too high structure start to sweep through the league. And that gave the Chiefs trouble at times last year. It's part of the reason why they wanted to trade away Tyreek Hill, because they maybe felt like his value wasn't as much if more defenses were going to play lighter boxes and too high safeties. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's compressed. But on the other side of the ball, I think the play calling has gotten really good from an offensive perspective at beating a lot of the cover three looks that the Legion of Boom Seahawks, the 2013, 2014 Seahawks, were so good at stopping opposing offenses with. So now we have to see the offenses kind of catch up to more of the two high structures, which it's more of like a cyclical thing that's going back and forth, where they had to spend years after the 2013-14 Seahawks trying to beat the single high through cover three structures.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's not kind of like a this kind of like substitution effect of athleticism, where that 2013 Seahawks defense was an era where like two or three hyper athletic guys on defense really stood out, and the general athleticism of defenders overall. I mean, think about some of these guys who are playing defensive end, Tej. Like they're just so athletic all over the field, right? At different sizes and levels. And then on the offensive side, you've got these freaks like, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, these huge dudes, DK Metcalf, who can just do crazy things with their bodies and attack offenses. And not to say nothing of the George Kittles and the Travis Kelce's, who have also different body types again that can do these things. But so as athleticism has gone up, feels like defense, that kind of standout athleticism has diminished just because relative to the rest of the league, you have to defend so many more athletes in so many more situations. You've got to bring a guy down to get out of that, that cover three and get into the too high. So I think that it's a difference between athleticism and scheme, and kind of a nice merge to see, like you said, that kind of cyclical change. We are, I do believe, in kind of a transition point with the NFL, looking at that. I think a big question is, can you get two safeties to play defense? Like, can you have two guys who can really have this like redundant, self-reinforcing shell up top? And we're kind of seeing that as the efficiency numbers are a little bit different here. Let's talk about the specific matchups. Let's talk about the specific sides of the ball. Anywhere you want to start, you pick. Dealer's choice.
Yeah, so sticking on that Chiefs offense versus Eagles defense, the matchup I think that is kind of going to determine the outcome of this game is the Eagles pass rush versus the Chiefs offensive line and their ability to avoid taking sacks. So Mahomes has a 3.9% sack rate, which is the third lowest rate in the league this year. Something that he's gotten better just from a pure quarterbacking perspective is not taking sacks. And the Chiefs really learned this lesson in that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers 2 years ago, where they kind of vowed to not let a defensive line ruin their offensive line and ruin Mahomes's play as much as that happened. And now we see this revamped Chiefs offensive line come into this game. The interior of their offensive line, which starts with Creed Humphrey at center, is really good, and they stack up against any interior offensive line in the league. But I do think that they're leaky at the tackle position. Orlando Brown is an okay left tackle, but you probably want to see a little bit more from him this year. And the way Orlando Brown loses is through a slower kind of path where he kind of will push the defensive end more outside, opening up the B gap for Mahomes to run through, as he often likes to go through. Andrew Wiley on the other side hasn't played particularly well this year, and especially of late. So we're going to see some like repercussions from that, I think, in this game. And you're going up against Hassan Reddick, ninth in pressure rate this season among edge rushers, Javon Hargrave, first in pressure rate among interior defensive linemen. So I'm really interested to see what Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator, kind of does to put Hassan Reddick on Andrew Wiley and try to take advantage of that weak link on the offensive line, as well as some interesting alignments with Javon Hargrave to try to get him in a spot where he can attack some of the weaker areas of the Chiefs offensive line.
Okay, I'm totally going to play on your expertise here, but it's my sense, and I don't know if it's my sense. This is objective reality that the Eagles are pretty amazing at stunts on the defensive line. They'll take Sweat, they'll take Reddick, and they'll get these leverage situations where it's just like, man, I don't know how you block that. I don't know how you deal with that. Have the Chiefs played a defensive front who are as ferocious and effective at stunting and kind of creating those different angles as the Eagles are? Or is this going to be kind of an unprecedented test for their season heretofore?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I don't think the Chiefs have seen something particularly this tough. I think what the Eagles do from a stunt perspective is really hard, but just like the pure talent they have on their defensive line as well is something that I think is gonna kind of give them a tough time here. And well, so the team that stunted the second most in the league this past year. The 49ers, they started on 25% of pass rushing snaps. The Chiefs did have a really good day from a passing perspective against that front, but I think the 49ers defensive line, while it's talented, it doesn't have some of the players, and like you were mentioning, that the Eagles have to do it with. So I think that they're going to be able to really kind of pick and choose when they want to do their stunts in this game and take advantage of that. But I think the thing that makes the Eagles stunts so special is they don't do it often enough where offense can kind of have like a tendency to go against that. Like they pick and choose their spot specifically when they think it'll work, and they've been effective on those.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think the idea of Patrick Mahomes extending the play is so important, especially in the second half when the game script gets so different. And that, I mean, that of course requires time, right? Like that's an obvious thing to say out loud. But you specifically look at like Pacheco in the passing game, negative 2.32 air yards per pass. He's getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage, obviously, but that's not like, hey, he's running her out. That's like, hey, he's filling in a run fit, or excuse me, filling in a pass block fit, and then looping out and kind of finding himself in space there. So will the Chiefs be able to kind of leverage the offensive line long enough to let Mahomes make a couple reads and then dump it off to an athlete in space I think is an open question. What I'm interested in the Eagles relative to the 49ers, not to push us off the defensive line too quickly, is the way the 49ers use their linebackers. Often they'll have them at the line and they'll kind of run back into coverages. They'll be in different situations. It seems to me that it's less advantageous to have your linebackers having to cover a lot of ground against the Pat Mahomes-led offense than it is with the Eagles, who are going to play a little bit more traditional, to my understanding, a little bit more traditional kind of alignment with those linebackers. So there might be some gains, even as the stunts are the same, with just the linebackers having a little bit more pass protection coverage against this, a little bit better pass coverage against this Chiefs defense offense.
For sure. Yeah. And you pointed out at the beginning of the show that the Chiefs lead the league in pass rate over expected. It's not a surprise to anyone when Andy Reid comes out and passes on 70% of plays. And the Bengals took advantage of that last year in the second half of the AFC Championship game, where Lou Anarumo went with the drop 8 into coverage and rush 3. And the Chiefs didn't run enough against that front to really make them hurt for kind of doing that. And so the Eagles, and it's basically, everyone says this every time whenever the Chiefs are in the playoffs, but you do want the Chiefs to run the ball. And so I do think that they will put their linebackers at some depth because of that. And then the other reason to put your linebackers at depth there is because of Travis Kelce and what he offers over the middle of the field. And the Eagles have been susceptible to intermediate passes over the middle of the field this year. About 5 to 15 air yards is where they've generated, or they've given up like some passes more than other areas of the defense. So I'm sure the Chiefs will be trying to target that, and the Eagles are going to have a counter with whether it's linebacker depth, whether it's having getting into another defensive back like Avonte Maddox in that area to kind of make sure that they're not just getting continuously beat by Kelce in that spot.
Yeah, so you have some numbers we talked about kind of off air, and I want to get you're talking about kind of the pass location of the Eagles and the Chiefs and how those specifically match up. Tell us a little bit about those numbers, about the spots on the field and the relative positioning of how these defenses and offenses function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I was just breaking down some numbers today using the public data that's available through NFL FastStar. And so NFL FastStar classifies 3 pass locations: left, middle, and right. And that's from the quarterback's perspective or the offense's perspective. So when offense have been throwing to the Eagles right, which is like their left this year, they've been the Eagles have been the 3rd best pass defense from that side of the ball. They're the 9th best over the middle of the field, but they're the 23rd best when the quarterback is throwing to his right against them. And so that is something that might just be a split that is kind of just gone out because of variance. But if the Chiefs do kind of find this in the data and dig into the film and kind of find a reason why that's been happening for the Eagles, they can kind of go after that. And I think that's like where you can also get Juju Smith-Schuster involved in this game, is if you have Kelce kind of taking up the middle of the field, if you put Juju out to the right, or you put Marquez Valdes-Scantling out to the right and you take a deep shot with him, or you throw an intermediate pass with Juju, that's another way for someone outside of Kelce to generate some receiving yards in this game.
Yeah, the idea of gravity, I think, is going to be super important because this linebacking core is not bad. And I'd say they make strides. They've made strides in the pass game from last year. Last year, I believe all four of their kind of most involved linebackers in the passing game, a lot of completion percentage above 80%. And this year, none of them have a lot of completion percentage above 80%. I believe that's correct. And so the gravity, I think, is going to be so important because, like, hey, they're doing kind of the basics of their responsibilities better. But when you have a guy like Kelsey that commands attention, how do you deal with the counterpunch given that, provided that the Chiefs are healthy? And you look at kind of the distribution of targets from the Chiefs, Kelsey's getting 25.7%, but then it's Smith Schuster and MBS and McKinnon are all right there in that 10 to 15 range. Those guys are able to, again, different body types, different skills, able to line up in different situations and really kind of stretch you out across the field. Not to mention a guy like, you've got Sky Moore underneath who's so fast and can potentially do some things. I think that the Eagles linebackers are really going to have a hard time uh, with diabolical Andy Reid is what I'll say. With 2 weeks of Andy Reid just sitting and scheming with a notepad, if his weapons are all healthy, that's the position group I believe he's going to attack is those linebackers over the middle for sure.
Definitely agree. I think you have to with the way that the Eagles have kind of approached their roster building, like we talked about on Monday. Like I think that is probably the weakest area of their defense because their secondary is so strong between their cornerbacks and their safeties and all the interceptions they've racked up from that area. And then their pass rush, like we were talking about earlier, is so strong. So when looking at from the Eagles' perspective and kind of their plan for action, I don't think they should blitz Mahomes that much in this game. Mahomes has had a better EPA per pass against the blitz than he hasn't. So, it's some of the things that you want to be careful about when you're going up against Mahomes, given how good he is, both as a mental processor and kind of picking out those blitzes ahead of time, but also as a just a pure quarterback talent and how he's able to kind of get rid of the ball quickly when blitzes come. But what I do think that they can do is they can rush for and kind of drop the 7 into coverage. And what I think that does for them is two things. One, it might tempt the Chiefs into running the ball more, which is what you want. You want them to run the ball against your lighter fronts. But the Eagles are also allowing a negative 0.14 EPA per pass when only rushing 4 this year. And when the Chiefs go against 5 pass rushers, they are at a 0.35 EPA per pass, best mark in the league. That drops all the way down to 0.2 against 4 pass rushers. So I think we're going to see Jonathan Gannon do a lot of the 4 pass rush stuff and kind of let his back 7 drop into coverage more and try to take away the Chiefs passing options.
Yeah, and where I think that pressure really comes in and will be really interesting to look at is kind of you have this big split between early downs EPA and late down success. So the Chiefs, 4th in early downs EPA, 6th in the league in 3rd and 4th down success. Very good, slightly worse in 3rd and 4th down success. But I think you've posted a graph about how the quarterbacks did in 3rd and long this season, and we've talked about like 3rd and 6 plus. Mahomes is really, really good in that situation. And the Eagles defense, they're 17th in early downs EPA. They're 12th in 3rd and 4th down success, right? And so they're a little bit better in those 3rd and 4th down situations. Again, I think you've got to think that offense beats defense there in that situation of the Eagles are allowing a 6.7 average 3rd down distance, 6.7 yards to go. That's 19th in the nation overall. And so I'm a little bit worried about that consistency of how do they mitigate the pass rush? How do they navigate the pass rush, knowing that Mahomes can create, knowing that 3rd down has been their specialty, but it's also what the Chiefs are really good at and extending plays and getting those big, those big late completions. I wonder how they're going to approach early downs versus late downs in terms of pressure and in terms of stunts and bringing other guys there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And like that's the other thing I think with Mahomes this year that he's gotten even better than he already was is like he'll take what's given to him more than he used to. And if that's like the I think like the big issue with like defending the Chiefs offense is before there was like a small blueprint out there that could work for teams that had the right personnel, which was kind of taking away a lot of the deep stuff and forcing Mahomes to go underneath. And he like didn't like to do that as much. And he would force the deep shot eventually. But when you have someone like Pacheco, like you mentioned, like where he's going to be used on routes where he can swing out, I think it makes it a lot tougher, and it forces all 11 defenders to really have to play well in this game for the Eagles. And they are capable of it because of how talented they are from and how well coached they are on the defensive side. But it's a very, very tough ask to slow down this Chiefs offense. It's been a buzzsaw basically the entire season.
Indeed, indeed it is. And how they do it, I think will be interesting to watch. I know that like the way that I watch football, one, always on mute, especially during a Super Bowl when I don't know that I'm going to get a lot of like good on-field commentary, but two, I really try and watch the defensive line just a lot to say like, how does this kind of influence the structure? I'm either watching the defensive line or watching the safeties. And I think the Eagles are a really fun team to just watch the defensive line and you're kind of going to know what's going to happen the rest of the play, especially because if they do well, Mahomes won't be able to create. If they don't do well, the play will be extended and he'll be able to create. So certainly one of the more important matchups there. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. We're 25 minutes here, so getting close to the half. We'll say thanks to you guys who are watching. If I know Twitter's down, so I don't know how many people are in here because we haven't seen the link. But if you're in here and you've got questions or thoughts, we'd love to take those. We'll have a little time at the end to address some questions about the matchup and the game as well. So make sure you toss those into the chat or on Twitter if you're one of the lucky few who are able to tweet at this moment. Let's talk about the Eagles. Eagles third in offense overall. They're third in success rate, 12th in passing success rate, first in rushing success rate. Of course, driven a lot by Jalen Hurts, but also driven by a couple of I'll go so far to say very scrappy and very interesting running backs that they kind of use in tandem with Sanders and Gainwell and Scott are kind of all around there as well. So lots of a little bit of multiplicity out of the backfield in that run game. The Chiefs are 12th in defensive success rate, 7th in passing success rate allowed, and 19th in rushing success rate allowed, which is what I'm going to set you up for to talk about. This Chiefs run defense against this Philadelphia run offense is potentially problematic, right?
For sure. And the interesting thing about the Eagles running backs that you mentioned is they're not necessarily great running backs individually. Like they all have negative rushing yards over expected per carry this season, but they all have a positive EPA per rush. And so that means that they're getting these successful plays more often than not. They're breaking off longer carries. And that's the gravity that we like to talk about with Jalen Hurts in this rushing game here. And that's what I think is going to be the problem for these Chiefs linebackers is having to kind of defend everything coming over the middle of them from the pass game, and also worrying about the triple options that the Eagles have available to them, which is giving the ball to a running back, Jalen Hurts design rush, or passing the ball. And it really puts the defenses in a bind. And I think the Chiefs defense since week 10 has been the 8th best against the pass. They were 16th on the season, so they have been getting better, but I don't think they've necessarily seen a offense quite like this, and I think it will pose an issue to them in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said the triple option. We talked about that. I mean, that's basically the offense Jalen Hurts has run since his senior year at Oklahoma, and his ability to rush has just been so pivotal for this team. Again, 4.5 yards per attempt, but 123 attempts, 13 touchdowns, and notably 336 yards after contact there. So he's able to create and add another dimension. We talked about on Monday, kind of in college, the difference between his explosive rushing and his efficient rushing, getting those first downs. He's got 26 runs of 10 or plus yards this season for Philadelphia. That's designed runs. And in terms of first downs, he has 68 on the season. So definitely in a short yardage situation, he gives you a dimension that they may not have. If I'm the Chiefs, that's what I'm worried about, is kind of getting stuck. Again, you think about RPO, you think about play action, which Philadelphia only runs 31.8% of the time. But again, in terms of charting data, that's a little bit nebulous because it's hard to know exactly what the pre-snap call was and kind of what the reactions were with an offense that's so multiple. But the idea that a linebacker has to choose, do I stop Jalen Hurts running, or do I let a guy like Dallas Goedert go wide open, I think is really between a rock and a hard place there. I think that was the French pronunciation, Dallas Goddard, right there. But yeah, so I think that kind of choice between what do I defend is extremely tough, and maybe even physically tougher than the kind of Mahomes, which guy over the middle am I going to have to cover? That idea of having to cover the run and the pass in any given play is really, really taxing on a defense that, again, has been good enough, but I don't know that we would call it good.
Yes. That's what I think it is. And when you start this many rookies, it makes sense to have as many growing pains as they had early in the season. But the talent is getting better for the Chiefs defense, but it still isn't at like there completely yet. And what I thought was interesting is the Chiefs defense was the one of the best defenses in the league this year against play action, and they actually let up better EPA per pass against play action than not play action. So their linebackers do seem to not be biting on play action, which I think could be a good start for them. And so the Eagles should try to avoid play action in this game. One, because of that split, but I also think you don't want to turn your back on Chris Jones and give him extra time. Like, I think Chris Jones has been so disruptive this year, in part to he has the shortest path to the quarterback at the end of the day. And when you're running play action and he can get into the backfield quicker, and instead of your time to throw on that play being 2.5 seconds, it becomes 3, and you give him that extra half second to get there. I think that could be a really big difference in this game. But outside of him, like given how good this Eagles offensive line is, the Chiefs defensive line is going to need a secondary pass rusher to step up in this game, whether it's George Karlaftis, whether it's Frank Clark. They're going to need someone else because the Eagles offensive line can devote a lot of attention to Chris Jones, especially on the interior with Jason Kelsey. They're getting help from another guard, and I not necessarily take him out of the game, but definitely limit him more than, for example, the Bengals offensive line was able to do 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When you talk about weapons for the Eagles, again, I think they're even more multiple, even more dangerous than what Kansas City has in the stable right now. You've got Brown, you've got Smith, you've got Goddard. Those guys are responsible for 70% of targets. That's just a huge, an immense share. Brown 28.7% of targets, Smith 27.1, and Goddard at 14.4. Just extreme production out of those guys. 9.7 yards per attempt for Brown, 8.7 yards per attempt for Smith, and 9.8 for Goddard. So what they're going to run. I think we saw the quote, and I can't remember the player, but someone asked one of the Eagles players about pre-snap motion, because I believe they are last in the league in pre-snap motion. They don't move around very often, and he basically said, what's coming. The NFL is about matchups. We're going to create matchup problems. Yeah. And with athletes like Brown, Smith, and Goddard, it's hard not to believe them, especially when you've got Hurts who can extend plays as soon as you kind of forget about him as well. And then in the past game, Gainwell and Sanders have been pesky and need to be accounted for as well. So I like kind of the phrase I'll use sounds a little melodramatic, Tej, but the kind of brutal simplicity of the Eagles offense. And not to say that it's simple, but saying we know what we want to do. We know that you can't defend everything we want to do. We're going to put the pressure on you to decide. I think it's a very college mentality. And I believe that the NFL kind of lags behind college sometimes in innovation in certain ways. And we're seeing that kind of movement from the RPO reality of college football moving up into the NFL. But it is certainly, it's a little bit refreshing to have less of a pro style, a little bit more of a multiple option style offense here in the league.
For sure. I love how you put that and the term that you used. And what I keep coming back to about those weapons in particular is the Chiefs defense was the second worst defense on the season at defending middle of the field passes, only better than the New York Giants, who's we know we're signing linebackers basically off the street at the end of the year. And the Eagles offense were the best offense at throwing over the middle of the field. And when you kind of break down that target share in particular, A.J. Brown had 30 middle of the field targets. Devontae Smith had 18 and Dallas Goedert had 17. So I think it's going to be a big A.J. Brown game, who's been quiet in the playoffs so far. And we saw the Eagles try to get him some work early in the game last week with some screens. And I don't know necessarily if that's going to work, because these Chiefs cornerbacks are more athletic than most corners in the league. But I do think you can take advantage of that middle of the field, the safeties that drop down the Chiefs linebackers, and really just feed AJ Brown in this game and force the Chiefs to tackle. The most impressive thing about the Chiefs against the Bengals was it was their best tackling performance of the season against a team that is notoriously hard to tackle with Jamar Chase, and they were able to do it. So if that's any signal for how they're going to play in this game, then they maybe have a better feeling and maybe more confidence in themselves that they can actually tackle in this game. But when the ball is in AJ Brown's hands, he's one of the toughest players in the league to tackle. And so if he's getting fed over the middle of the field, I could see him turn a lot of 5-6 air yard passes into first downs or even explosive plays from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm yeah. Jalen Hurts over the middle of the field has been really, really great. 72% completion on intermediate and center, 80% completion on short and center. And if you look at his deep balls, he's 33% deep left, 38.5 rather on deep right, but he's 50% over the middle there as well. So if they can really test those in between the numbers, in between the seams there, I think that's really where they're going to try and put a lot of pressure on this Chiefs defense, who, like you said, hasn't necessarily been stellar in that area overall. So yeah, interesting to see kind of where they'll put the ball and how they'll pan out with the idea of these kind of obvious, not obvious is too big of a word, but like these notable discrepancies in the Chiefs defense and kind of their holes there. I'm interested to see what the Eagles are going to do kind of scheme wise there as well. Their passing and their passing EPA kind of leads their passing success rate, which is interesting to me because I think of the Eagles off the top of my head, third success rate overall on offense. They're able to move the ball, 49.0% success rate, which is again, third in the league, very, very good. But they're 12th in passing success rate compared to 6th in EPA per pass. So obviously passing has higher upside. And so you're going to get some of those bigger plays there. But I do think I think it's easy to fall in the trap of thinking that the Eagles are kind of this plodding offense, when in reality they're getting some of these explosive plays, and they get into these personnel groupings that I think set them up to find a guy to break off a 20-30 yard touchdown that can really capitalize on finishing these drives without having to be, brutally successful every play all the way down. So I think the Eagles' explosiveness on offense is ultimately a little bit underrated, just because they do run so much, and you do think about, hey, the option, they're going to get these couple of yards, but they do have an explosive ceiling, again, with the weapons of Smith and with Brown, that I think will be really effective in stretching this Kansas City defense. I'm inclined to believe, Tej, we're going to get a little bit of a shootout here.
I hope so. And I do want to touch on that point about the explosive passes. I think one of the biggest revelations of this season has been how good Jalen Hurts has become as a deep ball thrower. Like throws that go over 20 plus air yards. He's been really good at those. And I think that comes back to the AJ Brown trade and him feeling more comfortable with that. But like the interesting thing about AJ Brown was when he was in Tennessee, he was he ate on in breakers, on yards after the catch. Now he's kind of transformed his game to be this receiver that can dunk on corners down the field. And I like think that the Eagles should be able to hit on some of those deep balls in this game. My only thing is, with Jalen Hurts' injury, we've seen his deep ball passing kind of take a little bit of a step back. We saw him miss on 2 throws against the 49ers 2 weeks ago. So I'm hoping that he can be healthy enough for this game to kind of hit on those. And that comes back to kind of like who the Chiefs have at corner available to them. So from like a size perspective, I don't think you can have Trent McDuffie, who is 5'11", on AJ Brown, given that AJ Brown's height of 6'1", but he plays like he's 6'3", available to them. So I think we're going to see Trent McDuffie on Devontae Smith, given their profiles and their quickness and their athleticism kind of match up well together. And the Chiefs are going to have to use some of their other corners to make sure that those AJ Brown deep balls don't happen in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a portrait there that we've seen of some key matchups between the Eagles kind of stunting on the offensive line and letting Mahomes create, how the Eagles can create pressure and use gravity to create leverage against or the Chiefs can do that against the Eagles linebackers. And then on the flip side, the kind of run pass spread over the middle. How can you stretch these defenses? And then the physical matchups, because again, Devonta Smith, very, very fast. AJ Brown, very, very big, takes a lot of ability there in different ways to kind of match up well. Though, yeah, awesome. Tej, any other kind of notes, fun facts, things that you wanted to get to about either side of the ball? Eagles offense, Eagles defense, Chiefs offense, Chiefs defense there, as we kind of are looking at this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. Just if I was Steve Spagnuolo and I was kind of game planning for this game, these would be like two kind of data points I would be looking at to kind of game plan. So Eagles have struggled against cover three this season, having a negative 0.13 EPA per pass against it. They've had a positive EPA per pass against every other coverage. The Chiefs haven't run cover three basically the whole year. They have very few snaps there, but if you have 2 weeks to prepare for this game, maybe you can kind of get your players into that mentality to play more cover three. But that's something I'm going to keep an eye on during the game. Another thing is the Eagles have struggled against the blitz, having a 0.05 EPA per pass against the blitz versus 0.12 not against it. So I think that this could be a Spags in his bag, Aaron Rodgers isolation 4-day retreat type thing where he's just thinking of every way possible to kind of come up with blitzes and things that can kind of get this really, really good Eagles offensive line out of sorts. And then also getting home to Hurts where he doesn't have the ability to scramble and also might not have the passing level to be able to take advantage of there being 1 or 2 less defenders in the back seven because they're sent on a blitz.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, so many layers here and so many kind of punches and counter punches I'm interested to see. I will say, I will invoke the weak axiom of revealed preference here, Tej, and say that if you haven't been playing cover three all season, it's probably because you don't have a guy who can do that
Yeah.
and kind of make that happen. But maybe, again, 2 weeks is a long time in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, you get a third week of at least half preparation because you're looking ahead to one of those guys as well. So maybe they can cook something up there. All right. I think we've kind of done our deep dive on both sides of the ball. I think we're going to get to some fun stuff and some prop bets. So Tej, I'm going to let you drive our fun stuff and our prop bets because you've got this covered, man. The surface area you've got here on the prop bets. I'm super interested. I've got a couple I think are fun, but let's dive into that and as well.
Yeah. And anyone, watching live, feel free to ask any questions as we go through this. So let's just do some fun stuff now that we've previewed the game. So what I want to hear from you is, these 2 weeks, like we mentioned, very long time. There becomes a lot of storylines that get talked about over and over and over. What has been your favorite overblown Super Bowl storyline? Like what's one that you actually like talking about or are interested to see play out?
Okay, this one isn't a Super Bowl storyline. So my first one, I'm going to cheat a little bit, but like the Burrow is better than Mahomes.
Yeah.
Kind of like everyone was just waiting for the Bengals to beat the Chiefs so they could unleash this just kind of scorched earth lava hot takes about like this one game referendum. So I think this playoff season has been the year of the one game referendum, which has just certainly been something that I don't love at all. I do like the Jalen Hurts story. I think that I don't know that you can say enough about like Jalen Hurts got benched in college, sat behind to went to Oklahoma, kind of reinvented himself and is here playing for the biggest title. Hard to root against that. Hard to not really appreciate that storyline.
I love
What
that. I
about
love
you?
that one. I wonder if Gardner Minshew is sitting there thinking, Jalen Hurts did get benched in a championship game before. Maybe I should be preparing to come in here just in case. But I really
I
like that
think
one.
somebody tweeted, one of the sports books tweeted that someone had put like $100 on Gardner Minshew plus 25,000 to win Super Bowl MVP.
Oh, that's what Super Bowl betting's all about. That's hilarious. For me, I think my favorite overblown Super Bowl storyline is like Andy Reid playing against his own team. I legitimately think that's so cool that he's playing against a team that he used to coach. And like the one way that Andy Reid kind of remembered, no matter how much success he had with the Eagles, was that he didn't end up getting that Super Bowl. Luckily for Eagles fans, they ended up getting a Super Bowl before Andy Reid did. I think it would have been really tough for them to watch Andy Reid go out and win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs without them not having one. So it's good that both of these teams and fan bases kind of have Super Bowls entering here. And that's why I think there feels like there's a little bit of a different energy around this Super Bowl, because it's not two or just one like completely starved fan base. I think it's really cool that Andy Reid already has a Super Bowl ring going up against the Eagles, who already have a ring as an organization as well.
Yeah, and we talked about on Monday too how different this Eagles team is. I mean, just from the Super Bowl team, even though it wasn't that long ago. So yeah, certainly pretty interesting there. I do wonder to what extent like Andy Reid thinks about I want to win this game, especially because it's against the Eagles, relative to I want to win this game because I'm a coach and I'd like to win a Super Bowl. I again, being so familiar with college, like there are college football coaches who hate other guys, hate them,
Yeah.
absolutely want to beat them, absolutely want to be a pain in the behind if they can't beat them. And I wonder in the NFL, like again, the money's different. That you move around a bunch, you got free agency. I wonder how different the attitude is. That's fascinating to me. Something I think might be unknowable, but is certainly interesting to me.
Yes.
Is like how much of a revenge game this is.
Yeah, and I want to touch on like what Doug Analytics said here in the chat, which by the way, great Twitter follow for everyone out there. Does some really sweet Giants data viz. It always inspires me to do data viz on my own. And he said over 2.5 passers open at plus 185 on DraftKings. It's now at plus 150. Another Philly special question mark. And I do think that maybe it's a factor that Andy Reid going up against his own team or Philadelphia back in the Super Bowl could play a role where we see a trick play in this game. We've seen trick plays in many Super Bowls because of the 2 weeks and because of how big of a stage it is and how you're looking for any edge in this game. And I'm hoping that we see a trick play, but I also think that there's a good chance that we do see one in this game. So I do like the odds of plus 150 as Doug pointed out here.
Yeah, again, I go to diabolical Andy Reid. Just saying, like 2 weeks with a notepad. I think that he definitely has something cooking. And again, Philadelphia being so mobile and being so athletic, I wouldn't be surprised to see something weird. All you need is one weird trick play. So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And okay, so let's go a little bit before we do prop bets. Let's go a little bit outside of football here for a second. So Rihanna is doing the halftime show, really cool musical guest. I want to hear from you what your favorite Rihanna song is, what one you want her to sing the most at halftime.
Okay, the Rihanna resurgence, right? This is like she's like coming back, right?
Yeah.
Very impressive. Going to be absurd, and I'm sure as I'm eating dip and snacks, I'll enjoy it. But I graduated high school like right at the time of like peak Rihanna, I think, in that like like late 2000s kind of thing. So this is near and dear to my heart. I think I'm gonna say my favorite song is "Take a Bow." Although there are many I could pick.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And when I was looking through her list earlier in the week, I was like, wow, there are a lot of songs she can perform that are hits and have like been like on the radio for like months at a time. For me, it's Don't Stop the Music. I think that might be the first song she plays if you're looking for that, because I think like the first song needs a type of like discernible beat that like other songs don't have, so to kind of like rile up everyone. So I think that might be it, but I'm not 100% sure. I would love for that to be it. Let's dig into some prop bets. Now you can't talk about the Super Bowl without doing prop bets. We already talked about the one Doug put up. How about anything else? Is there anything that you love from the Super Bowl prop bet spread?
Yeah, so first I'll say I have not been able to find any prop bets about what songs Rihanna will play. But I will also say that again, bet responsibly, have a bankroll, don't do anything crazy, don't bet anything you're not prepared to lose. So of course, obviously responsibly there. I personally will have zero money on prop bets. So I want to be full disclosure, going to talk about these, going to interesting. This is not gambling advice, not telling you to do this. I'm putting zero of my money on this. So just again, making that clear, we're just chatting here. The one that I looked and I liked was Jake Elliott to have over 1.5 field goals. For the Eagles. He had four against San Francisco, 5 against New York. And in a couple games in kind of key moments this season, he's really been relied on as they haven't been able to capitalize and score in the like finished drives. I think that I'm going to go with Jake Elliott, even though it's minus 105, but all he's got to do is kick two. That one is interesting to me just because I do think that the Eagles are going to be able to operate much better in kind of open space, and as the field shrinks, I think they're going to struggle a little bit, and so I do think that they'll end up kicking a couple field goals.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I really like that one, and that kind of fits into two that I kind of wrote down. Total field goals made over half in the first quarter plus 100 is when I wrote it down. I think like one of the first drives, whether it's the Chiefs, whether it's the Eagles, they are able to get into a scoring position, but they're not able to execute because of just like overall like Super Bowl nervousness and kind of rustiness coming off the 2 week break here. And so I like one field goal to happen in the first quarter. First half under 24 and a half kind of fits into this. And like some of the things that I just said, where you kind of have these two teams that are going to start a little slow, I think, because of just like all the nervousness and stuff that happens before the Super Bowl. And you have both quarterbacks not playing 100% healthy that are going to be getting their first live reps in like a long time here in the first half of the Super Bowl. And I think it might take them a while as well to kind of get settled in and to kind of loosen up a little bit, and then they can get going from there. So that's why I like those two specifically. Is there anything else that you liked as well?
Here's what I want to bet with my heart. Here's one I would love to see actually happen. I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not rooting for either team specifically, but you can get Jalen Hurts as Super Bowl MVP for plus 125, right? Mahomes is 120. So, just the winning quarterback. But you can also get Jalen Hurts as last TD scorer plus 800. You can paint yourself a Disney perfect narrative of Jalen Hurts scoring last touchdown, getting the MVP, and kind of double tapping there. Some of these anytime TD scores, you can still get MVS at plus 225. And again, with the kind of insane the Andy Reid factor, I think that the Chiefs are going to go deep in their bag, as the kids might say. They're going to be a lot of different looks, and so one of those guys down there, I mean, Juju's plus 240, McKinnon plus 180. I think there's some value in one of those guys. MVS plus 225 though seems like the one. It's just like something's going to happen. He's going to dial something up.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know, the host of this podcast, Eric Eager, really likes Jordy Fortson to be one of the first touchdown scorers in the game because of how the Chiefs get into 13 personnel when they're in the red zone. So that could be another kind of Hail Mary throw on that bet there. I like Devontae Smith.
Plus 1,000 for Fortson is plus 1,000 for anytime scorer, and he's plus 6,000 for first score. Amazing.
There we go. Yeah, that could pay for a nice trip to anywhere you want it if that ends up hitting. I like Devontae Smith anytime touchdown or first touchdown at plus 1,300. He leads the Eagles in red zone targets this season, and his red zone kind of depth of target, where it's like how many yards away from the end zone have his catches been, have been 4.5 yards on average. So he's getting passes close to the goal line. And I think like he could get into the end zone here. Maybe the defense focuses on AJ Brown as well there. And on the other side of the ball, Isaiah Pacheco over 16 and a half receiving yards. What we were talking about with the preview, it's like, I feel like this could be a pretty big Pacheco game, both on the ground and through the air. And if he gets like 2 or 3 swing passes, he could go over this amount given how well he's done on those originally. So those are some of the ones I like. Do you have anything else that you want to put out?
Yes. My last one that I like is longest completion. 37 and a half. You can get it minus 125 for Mahomes, minus 115 for Hurts. I think that I like it for Mahomes. Again, you talked about Pacheco with a ton of yards after catch. You've talked about the linebackers for the Eagles and kind of the issues they might have being put in conflict. I like the over on 37 and a half longest completion for Mahomes. I think that that's going to work really, really well with the style of attack they're going to go after for the against this Eagles defense.
Yeah, I love that. But those were some of the ones that we just that caught our eye, and we're not super researched bettors here. So take those with a grain of salt, but just thought it would be fun to do. Super Bowl prop bets. I think
unless they're right, and then you'll never hear me stop talking about it.
yes,
So
exactly. But yeah, if you want to wrap up here, I really have nothing else to say. I appreciate everyone who listened, even though I kind of stunk that Twitter went down right as we went live. I know people usually watch through the Twitter live stream as well, but I'm glad we were still able to kind of do the live stream here through YouTube, and then the video and everything will be uploaded afterward.
Yeah, we'll definitely get the audio and the video up on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Yeah, we were going to take some questions here, but it is apparent at the viewing numbers that the Twitter outage certainly hampered our audience here, and that's totally fine. Hopefully, this is good information. This has been the second part of our 2-part Sumer Sports show preview of the Super Bowl. You can catch episode 1 from Monday wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, to Sumer Sports on Twitter if Twitter ever gets fixed again and we can all tweet. And make sure you're following Tej at Tej FB Analytics on Twitter, and me on Twitter at StatsOWar. I've been Parker Fleming. That's Tej. Make sure that you share this if you liked it. We're trying to get, anyone who wants to hear it can be able to hear it. Thanks so much for listening. And I'm certain you'll hear from me and Tej again soon in some capacity.